Matt Halloran, a very, very warm welcome to the Humans versus Retirement podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Matt, this is cool. For the first time in my 85 episodes, I'm interviewing a podcast pro on my podcast. So I'm a little intimidated. I'm scared of getting critiqued, but actually I'm pretty comfortable with where I am now. So I think we're in a good spot to have this conversation.
Well, 85 episodes in, man. I mean, you've done the reps, so I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. Listen, we've had some wonderful conversations. And notwithstanding how grateful I am to you, Kirk, and your business to really helping me have the confidence to take 2 feet, jump off the big springboard and into the world of podcasting, not knowing what the hell I'm doing to start with. So these 85 episodes are definitely down to you guys. So thank you for that. And we're going to delve into that a little bit later on. But what I really want to do is first touch on you, because you are a force in the podcasting world. And I just want to understand your journey into where you are now, because it hasn't always been in this environment. And I'd love for you just to share with the listeners where you started, where you've got to, where you are now, and kind of why you are, I think, one of the, if not the most loudest voices, passionate voices around podcasting and the benefit of sharing your voice with the world.
So it started really early for me, man. So in high school, my high school had a 100-watt radio station. And when I was 13 years old, I took a class to be on the radio, and I was Madman Matt Halloran. And I got done. Now, this was we had LPs, we had reel-to-reel commercials where editing was actually a razor blade with a Scotch tape. And I remember getting off my first show, and I ran into my advisor's office. Her name was Mrs. Kirkpatrick. I said, Mr. Kirkpatrick, I know what I want to be when I grow up. And she said, well, God, I hope it's not a DJ. And I was like, no. So I did that all through high school, just being behind the mic, learning how to edit commercials, doing a lot of voice work. Then I went into the Navy, didn't really do anything there because the job wasn't open. There's actually a job called, it's actually a radioman, which is you do broadcasting for the Navy. That wasn't a job I could get. Got out of the Navy, went right back in. My college had a radio station, WIDR, and so I was the news director there. I did probably 4 shows a week. I always just loved being behind the microphone. I loved telling stories. I loved the challenge of trying to find a logical flow between this song and this song with something that I could say to make that transition. And then my life took many, many different directions. I have a degree in applied ethics and communications. My grandfather told me, the 2 most unemployable degrees you can possibly get. And then I got into financial services after I became a therapist after grad school, found out I wasn't very good at it, and got into financial services. And Dan, I started in financial services and I had 2 screens. The employer back then had no idea why I wanted 2 screens. One was because I had Investopedia open up because I didn't know what you guys were talking about. Like, you guys, there's a language, right? And there's even a difference between UK and US. And so anytime an advisor would say something, I'm feverishly typing to try to find out what, this is or this is or this is. And I just fell in love with this industry. So there's something about it. There's something about the passion. There's something about the responsibility that you all take that I don't think people give you enough credit for. And then I met this crazy Canadian guy at a conference. I was running a practice management consulting company and he was running a marketing and branding company. And we wanted to do something disruptive. And we found out very, very quickly that podcasting didn't really exist in any systematized form. ProudMouth was born. And not to brag, but we're very, very proud of this. We've done 10,000 podcast episodes and over 150,000 social media posts for financial services professionals, mostly in North America. So yeah, that's the journey, and we're still just plowing through, man. It's having fun. So
yeah. And it feels like the journey's still very much at the start, right? So, so much more to do in this world.
Because of compliance here in the States, because of the regulatory bodies, there are still organizations that won't allow advisors to do what you do. I mean, you having 85 episodes, you are so far ahead of everybody else too, Dan. That's an important thing to keep in mind. When you're using this professionally, it's all about how much thought leadership you have accessible to your ideal clients and existing clients. But yeah, so out of our ideal target market, we maybe have 2 or 3% of the marketplace. And so it's still huge growth opportunities for ProudMouth.
Yeah. Matt, I want to break our conversation down into two parts. They may not be officially kind of, we're going to do this bit first and then stop that bit and go into the second bit. I think it will naturally flow in our conversation. But I want to use your wisdom, your knowledge, and your experience of all those episodes that you've produced. And actually going back to the early days of radio, when we think about podcasting, and maybe we term podcasting as sharing your voice, whether you're doing, people do live shows, which is podcast, obviously recording. It's basically radio, but recorded, right, to a degree. Same thing. But podcasting as a tool, I think, for kind of reinvention and connection and everything. And so I want to touch on that from two angles, really. One, for everybody listening that is not a financial advisor, that is thinking about their retirement. And I recently recorded an episode with Helen Wilkie, and Helen is a professional editor, and she talked about why writing a book is interesting and could be real purposeful and a way of sharing your story in retirement. And I'd love to just spend some time with you getting your thoughts on, actually, why not launch a podcast as someone who is entering their second half of life, who is thinking about communicating their wisdom and their knowledge and their passions and their stuff. Podcasting could be a wonderful avenue for people to really delve into subjects and, as I said, passions and knowledge, and sharing that with the world, right? I mean, it could be something absolutely amazing for people to do. And so I want to get your thoughts on that. And let's go through barriers to entry. They've been taken down. It's really easy now for people to do this. So let's go there, right? What do you think about that as a way to reinvent yourself post full-time career?
Well, I think there's two different directions that I would actually take that question. And surprisingly enough, I'm already prepared for what you're talking about. My wife knows about this already. I have a Zoom recorder. It's something I've already purchased for myself so that when I am retired or when my wife and I travel, because work optional is really probably the direction I'm going to be going,
Yeah.
I want to interview people. That's all I want to do. I've got this portable, really, really wonderful recorder that's got some little dials on it so you can dial things in. And I want to be able to sit there and ask people to have them tell me their story. That is, first off, what can happen a lot of times in retirement, and you know this better than anybody, it can get very isolating and lonely because you're not hanging out with your work friends as much anymore. People are at different stages of your life. In interviewing somebody, having a microphone and having that level of listening and engagement can really deepen relationships very quickly. But it also gives you the opportunity to continue to explore the world. And if you are an outgoing person and that sounds like fun for you, it's going to cost you maybe a couple £100, right? That's it. To be able to buy every single solitary thing that you need. And that would be for good equipment, by the way, for you to be able to publish or to record unbelievable interviews. If you're on a road trip and you're traveling through Europe, interview people that are doing the same thing. And it just can be absolutely fantastic. So that's one of the directions that I think you could go. What we're finding, because many advisors that we've worked with have done this for their clients, is it's this medium because it's portable radio, Dan. That's how, when we had to explain what podcasting was 8 years ago, because people didn't know what it was, we always said it was just portable radio. And the other really wonderful thing about this is you can distill your story. So many advisors are doing this now is they're getting their clients who are at a stage where they're still magnificently competent and cognizant and able to share their story, and they're interviewing them about their life. And then they put it on a flash drive or a disc or whatever, and it is part of the family meeting that advisors have with the matriarch and the patriarch and the kids and the grandkids. Do you want to know why or how grandpa or grandma made their money? Do you want to know about what our life was like? Because kids don't always ask, Dan. They don't always ask. And so if you have that chance to distill that and do that, it's a wonderfully liberating thing because we want to tell our stories. And if you mediate it and moderate it well through a good interview process, you can have some magical stuff.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, I've had 3 clients on the podcast. I've got many more lined up who are kind of, I suppose, getting they want to be interviewed, but they're plucking up the courage to share their story. Many people want to. But out of the 3 people I've had on, they've got huge amounts out of that conversation. By that, I mean what's come off the back of it. So I've had listeners of the podcast specifically reach out to my clients and going, can we just have a chat about what that, and then they've got huge amounts of satisfaction about how their story has helped or impacted someone else thinking about this the same way. And it's to a degree that one of them is actually, they're not thinking of launching a podcast, but they're kind of saying, actually, look, I really want to help you get the work that you do out there. So if anyone comes in and listen, I've got kind of almost this story patter down now. I really want to share this with as many people as I can. So I think it's really important to understand that, as you said, we want to share our story, and for everybody listening to understand that no matter what you think of your own story, it is hugely impactful to a lot of people out there. And sharing it is a wonderful thing to do, particularly when you get into your second half of life. I think too many people downplay the wisdom that they have acquired during their working career. And I see it as a crying shame that these people aren't out there sharing all of that wisdom with the younger generation or other people coming through different routes of their career. I think podcasting could be an amazingly wonderful creative outlet for people to be able to share that story, share that wisdom with people. Yeah, I think I couldn't recommend it enough for people to do. I think it's wonderful, wonderful work.
Well, it's just a great opportunity for you to feel heard. As we age, it seems that fewer and fewer people really want to know because, most in the world, mostly we're youth obsessed, right? Where there are still, thankfully, cultures that don't have that sort of youth obsession. They're actually very interested in what's going on with their elders to be able to learn from them. And why I like podcasting, especially when you're trying to pass down those family stories, why that's so important is because it's portable. Right? They can listen to it when it's convenient. They're not sitting around, the dinner table and grandma is waxing philosophical about what she did in her 20s, which could be a 20-minute thing. And people don't want to just sit and listen, but they can pick up their phone and slap in their earbuds and, walk down the street and hear what grandma did in World War II, or, how she started her business and made this juggernaut empire. Those are the sorts of things that, and in fact, wealthy families do this. So the high net worth and the ultra high net worth, they actually have systems with their legal stuff that they are always distilling that family history. And I don't believe that you have to be unbelievably wealthy to be able to pass down your wisdom, because some of us have just as much wisdom as they do, just as many wonderful life experiences. You were talking about a book, my book that I recently wrote. I gave it to both of my children, and the unintended consequence was they came to me after they read it and said, "Dad, I didn't know that about you." And it's like, oh, I don't mean to be mean, man, but you don't ask, right? So I'm not just going to vomit stories. I'm just going to tell you the stories. But that's why podcasting is so wonderful. And this really goes either direction, whether you're distilling your family stories or you're using it as a second, kind of a career or just a wonderfully fun thing to do. It's very easy to do nowadays. You're right. All of the barriers are away. Couple $100 in materials. You can have an amazing sounded podcast. And more importantly, you can syndicate it and it can go out to the whole world.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that really surprised me. And I'm not saying it's not hard work, but I could imagine before we got into where modern technology is, we're recording over a great platform called Riverside at the moment. You kind of hit record, you put it onto a podcasting hosting platform, hit a couple of buttons, and it's out in everything that you could put it into. It takes a little bit of work, but not half as much as when you were taking a knife to film, right? I mean, that's tough. That's tough. And I think one of the things that I absolutely want to pick up on that you said is a couple of things, actually. One of them is around how we're wired as human beings, right? We want to move forward, we want to progress, we want to learn, and we want to grow. And one of the challenges I see in people that are entering in retirement is that they struggle to kind of put those things together still. Work has spoon-fed them those vital things that we want to be able to thrive and have great well-being. And as you rightly mentioned, you podcasting is a way to continue to learn and grow and meet new people and gather new relationships and, go into different social circles and things like that. I think, that must be a byproduct of all of the podcasts that you've seen. I felt that certainly, that my my network has grown significantly since I've been podcasting. It's just a fabulous unintended consequence of getting your voice out there.
When is the last time, I want your audience to think about this. When is the last time that you sat down with 100% focus and just asked people you care about questions? Right? We don't do that much anymore. And because of the way this medium is, and it's supposed to be a conversation and an interview back and forth, if people agree to doing it, they know that, Dan. They understand the societal folkways and mores and norms of this sort of conversation. I had a person who came up to me at a conference recently, because I do a lot of keynote speaking, and they said, and of course, I recognized them immediately because they were on our show. Now, we did 500 episodes of our podcast, the Top Advisor Marketing Podcast. And so I interviewed a lot of people, man. And sometimes I don't remember that I interview them because we just did so many. This woman came up to me and she gave me a hug. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. And she said, "You made me feel so smart when I was on your show." And she said, "I still use that in my prospecting system from a business perspective, because it's basically like a 30-minute commercial about how smart you are and how wonderful you are as a human if you do it right. Right? I mean, you've done that for 85 episodes, right? People get on your show, Dan, you change the relationship, because today most people are just talking at people. They're not truly listening to what somebody's saying, and this forces you to do that. It's such a wonderful way, and especially the people who are approaching retirement or in retirement. How cool is it to go interview your childhood friends that you haven't talked to forever ago, or that long lost cousin that you just have always wanted to connect with, and they're an hour and a half away, and you can just go ahead and pop down and interview them about their life. It really is life-changing.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things you mentioned there was, I think you said kind of, you may not have said this word, but we were talking about like legacy, I think here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about this a lot, actually. And it's only recently that it's really hit me, in that, I hope I've got many more years and many more podcasting to go on this planet. But I'm creating kind of a legacy of stuff. My kids are obviously not near retirement. Right? They're not listening to my podcast because they're wondering about how they're going to retire, but they're interested in what Dad has to say. And their teachers have listened. I mean, I go to parents' evening and they're like, "Oh, listen to episode thingy with thingy the other," and it's just a wonderful, to feel like you, as you said, you build confidence, you build wisdom, you build some expertise, you build a profile. Don't not believe that your family and friends are going to be hugely interested in this stuff. And the ability to create, I think, a wonderful legacy vehicle. I talk to a lot of people in retirement about legacy. And if I could change one thing about legacy, I want legacy to have nothing to do with money. That would be my wish, right? Because there's so much more to be more impactful on when it comes to legacy. And I think a book is one of those things, but podcasting equally so, that you are creating a footprint on the world that is hopefully not going to be deleted, in a way that creates a legacy of conversation, as you've said, a legacy of wisdom that I think people will look back and fondly remember as this goes on, right? What a wonderful medium to be able to do that.
There's nothing like it so far, right? I mean, they're in now with, especially using Riverside, not only can you record an amazing high quality audio show, but you also can have the full video. So Dan, your great grandkids could be on YouTube in 100 years from now and want to know who great grandpa was, and Bob's your uncle. There you are. Looking as you do right now in a very interesting point of time. There's a lot. The business applications and the personal applications of this are so vast, it's almost inconceivable how powerful this really is. And one of the things that I say all the time in speaking, or when I am on other people's podcasts, is we have been sitting around listening to stories since we were cave people sitting around a fire talking about the kill, right? This is part of how we are wired. We want to hear stories. We love stories. That's why we watch television. That's why we, listen to podcasts. That's why we listen to audiobooks. People love stories. And I just believe that this is such a smooth way to ease into a story and have it feel like it's storytelling without necessarily coming across as anything else.
On the storytelling element, right, is this, and I think I'm not going to load the question because it is, I think, the most effective way. You're obviously going to say that. But is this I suppose, the best, most effective way in terms of telling stories now? I mean, books are great, right? You've written a book. I've just written one that I'm waiting to publish, right? I think that's a great thing. But if we think about, and you said earlier on, sharing stories has become harder, right? We don't get time together to kind of sit round the fire and share the stories anymore, which I think is really sad. And I think we need to be more intentional at carving that time out. But is this the best, cheapest, most cost-effective way of, of actually taking some time out of your day to share a story, right? I mean, that, if you think about that, storytelling is at the forefront of our well-being as human beings. More people can share their stories really, really quickly for no cost whatsoever. Must be the best way, right?
Well, Dan, you know this. It's a lot less money than writing a book, man.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Hey, and not just money, a lot less worry and effort,
time.
Time. Writing a book's great, but this for me is just magic.
I think that one of the things that I think people need to understand about this medium, or that I would like for people to understand about this medium, is intentionality. I think it's very, very important for us to stay very focused with, I'm not just getting behind the microphone to just talk. I'm getting behind the microphone for a specific outcome. So, talking about the first 10 years of my life, that's going to be this show. I also believe that having it as a conversation, well, we know this from research, having it be a back and forth like what we're doing right now is more palatable for the audience. Very, very few monologue podcasts are wildly successful. If they are wildly successful, there's a huge amount of post-production, because we know that people can really listen to you for about 3 minutes. That's a discipline that I have implemented into my life, that when I'm on a podcast or if I'm being interviewed for the press or whatever, I talk in 3-minute segments. It took a long time to build the discipline. And if you go back, my opening one might have been 4, but everything is sub 3 from here. And that's just one of those finer point technique things that just make the flow seem easier for the listener. And the other fun thing is, if you want to get super nerdy, you can do so much stuff in post-production nowadays, and it's not difficult. You can drop in sound effects and, weird things and all the stuff through a program so I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but there's a program called Audacity that's free. It's an editing software that has almost every tool you could ever want to produce an unbelievable podcast. Take out the background noise, and if you coughed or whatever, it's super simple. But yes, this is such a cost-effective way to get your voice out into the world. And I hope more people who are approaching retirement or in retirement just buy a couple of microphones and go talk to people.
Yeah. As we kind of think about moving on, I've got a couple of more things I just want to quickly go on. I wrote something down as we were talking. I'll just read it out as I've written it. Connection in a disconnected world.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is more disconnected really than it's ever been. And I don't think we can underestimate the connection podcasting and interviewing actually gives us. And do you know what is really interesting for me, Matt? It's a bit like if you're a professional sportsman, right? The actual game, the 90 minutes of football, 44 minutes of basketball, whatever, that's just part of it. This 45-minute conversation was part of a process of me thinking about what we're going to talk about, us talking beforehand and getting to know you. So the whole thing is I think brings connection together. Whenever I have a guest on a podcast, really, I go into Dan the Stalker mode, which unfortunately is a little bit creepy for people. It's like, why have you looked at my LinkedIn profile 25 times? It's like, well, I'm just doing a bit of research. It's fine. But you get to know people and you get to know the things, and you can, and then post that, it's a really good thing I'm going to release this episode. And then they go, damn, I had a wonderful conversation. I'll share it on my thing and and you create wonderful connection. And you don't have to be, you are the other side of the pond.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed many people across the world, and I feel as connected, I think, as if we were sitting across a desk, right?
Right.
This is brilliant for that connection that we all want.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to be on same sort of thing, lots of podcasts from all over the world. And so there is a level of focus and a level of attention that good podcasters have, either being a guest on a show or hosting a show. And I do believe that we are so distracted and there's so much stimulus that pausing, relaxing, having the discipline to listen to a 30, 45-minute, 60-minute show really can allow you to, stop those tapes from playing that we all have in our heads for a little while and just feel a deep connection. And Dan, I know that because you just talked to my business partner about some of this stuff. People will call you and say, I already know who you are. I'm ready to go. Right. And so, and this is how we built basically our entire business over here. Was my partner and I, Kirk Lowe and I, were so open and so sharing of everything that we've learned over the many, many moons that we've been doing this stuff, that people would just call us and say, or come up to me at conferences, come up to him at conferences and say, we have this in common, right? Because we're also, I mean, I'm much less private than my partner is, but like, I've got chickens and I've got twin boys and I learned German longsword sword fighting. And we talk about this stuff and we post about this stuff on social because I am looking for people who have things in common with me that we can have that connection point. And that not only helps you build friendships, but it also can really help you build your business.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get on to the business of financial advising in a second, but just to finish that, I think that's also a really, really interesting point when people want to step away from their previous career but don't want to stop working, in brackets, right? So that a lot of people that enter into their second half of life want to do more stuff that they love and less of the stuff they don't, and they go, actually, I want to do some consulting. I think I would like to do more of this. What a wonderful way to get that out into the world, right? It's what you end up doing is attracting people that might want to buy or consume the new service or product or consulting work or thing that you want to do. And you've got more chance to do it on your terms because you can reach many more people. Again, I think that would be, if people are, they call it on-call careers, right? There's this big movement of these on-call careers. If anyone's thinking about setting up an on-call career, part of your strategy should be to set up a podcast alongside that on-call career, talking about what you do, sharing everything you've learned for free, because people will resonate with you if you're authentically you and you talk about being your own loud and having your own voice a lot, and you will attract a tribe of people that you can, that can help you in your on-call career and help you want to kind of establish something that you love doing that might be for the next 10, 15 years as you've left full-time work. So, I think it's hugely beneficial for anybody in any walk of life. Mm-hmm. One last question on this. We've talked about interviewing, and I agree with you. I think interviewing podcasts, stepping out, whether it's, off the cuff a little bit with people that are doing the same thing as you. I think interview podcasts are the best if you can do that. What topics could people start to explore going forward if they're thinking about a podcast?
Well, there's a couple of things here that I'd like for the people who are looking for encore opportunities, especially in retirement. The first thing is, there is no secret sauce anymore. So whatever your IP is or trade secrets, I can find all of that stuff out. So when you are using this to maybe build a second career or a second act, or just to explore something that you love, give everything away. The more authentically real you can be without, talking about the things, unless that's part of who you are, that my grandmother told me wasn't polite conversation, sex, money, politics, religion, right? Those are the 4 no-nos that you're not supposed to talk really about in polite conversation. Unless those things really float your boat, try to keep it in that way. To directly answer your question, I do firmly believe that a little bit of preparation goes a really long way. And if you are going to interview somebody, please make sure that you're going in. And what a lot of people who I know do is they always have 1 or 2 set questions. Like in our show, one of my favorite questions to ask towards the end, I do a show called Columbo. And what he was a detective, and what he would interview, suspects, and then he would be leaving the apartment or the jail cell, and he'd open the door, and then he'd close the door, and he'd say, one more thing, because their guard was down, and then he would get them. That was called the Columbo, right? And so I do that with what should I have asked you that I shouldn't have? And honestly, sometimes, Dan, that's the whole show, because they want to talk about something very different than I went in on with my focus. And that's the last thing is make it all about your guest. Every single solitary focus question should be to highlight the person that you're interviewing, because that makes them feel special. It's going to deepen the relationship, and you're going to find gold. And we talk about gold all the time in ProudMouth. Find the gold. And as a really good interviewer, your job is to tease that goal out. I always have an ultimate goal that you're going to share something with me on a show that you really needed to talk about. Because, dude, I was a therapist, right? I love that stuff, right? And I want that. And you can see it in their face when it comes out. Their shoulders drop a little bit. Their jaw is not as clenched anymore. You get them to that state of, now I'm really sharing. And the goal of being a great interviewer is to get them to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. And I want to talk about building trust through voice, because when I think about it, we're going to be probably nodding along to one another here, right? Because you put this material out in the world, I've read it, I've implemented it, I've kind of gone off and done some of my own things, and we've come back and talked about it, so we're going to be nodding a lot. But trust is, I think it's a word thrown around a lot, but it is probably the most vital word that we have in our profession when dealing with people's money and life. And I think, and you mentioned it a bit earlier on, I don't think there's any better way of building trust quickly through voice. And I've absolutely had it where I've started working. In fact, I had one this morning. I had a call with a potential new client who has been listening to the podcast, and she said, I feel like I already know you, and it feels like I'm speaking to a little bit of a celebrity. And that makes me feel weird, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like, so it's kind of, and so that conversation, for the last, number of clients that I've taken on, I haven't had to pitch. I haven't had to tell them what we do. It's kind of like, I can be fully present in their story because they are ready to go if they just share some stuff with me. And so this building trust through voice, right? It's so effective. We know it's so effective. Why aren't more financial planners, forget compliance, right? I know that's a bit of an issue, but why aren't more financial planners and or other industries and professions linked to the type of trust value that we have to create? Why aren't they using podcasting as this wonderful education and relationship building medium?
That's a big can of worms, man. I think the first reason...
You've got 3 minutes.
The first reason, I'll go quickly then. No, I'm kidding. I think the first reason is they think they're too busy. So I experience this all this time. I do all of the sales, most like 99% of the sales for ProudMouth. And so I hear it from professionals all the time. So this is not just, financial services professionals, but this is also adjacent people who provide services to financial services professionals, estate planning attorneys, accountants, other people who, consultants who sell their advice for a living. Because that's what you do, right? They're paying you for what's in here. So I think they think they're too busy, which is wrong, which just means they need a good coach and they need to get time management under control, because most people are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing as business owners. And they're also doing things to look busy, to feel busy, because they think that being busy actually creates opportunity, which is a whole load of crap, especially in the world that we live in today. I also think that people think, Dan, that they have their secret sauce, that they're afraid that if they share too much, then people will just take their advice and they won't hire them. And the reality is, yes, that is true. But most people don't want to learn how to manage their finances and go through all of the paperwork and understand all of the, ways to go ahead and do financial planning. They don't want to do all of that. But I also think some of them don't feel they have the personality to do it. And if you go back, which I don't know if you've done this yet, but you go back to listen to your first 5 or 10 episodes, you sucked, man. You were not good, and you just kept at it because now you're very, very good at it. right? You're very comfortable here. It's the reps, it's the muscle memory, it's the confidence, it's the practice. And I think, and I jokingly say this a lot, I think people half-ass their content and they should whole-ass their content. You have to be 100% ready to go ahead and do this in order to make it great, especially from a business perspective. But you said trust, and I have to come back to that, because the reason that person had that meeting with you this morning is because you put so much of your own personality and thought leadership out in the world. But here's the most important thing: when it was convenient for that person to consume it. And that is the power of this medium. The other liberating thing that you just explained, that I want everybody who is going to start a podcast, whether it's for business or for personal, is you don't have to do your dog and pony show. We know, so I've done sales for a really, really long time, that there's always a point where the switch flips and now I'm in presentation mode. This is who we are, and this is how smart I am, and this is why you should do business. You don't have to do that because you've already done that. You've distilled that in 85 episodes. In fact, here at ProudMouth, one of the things that we're currently working on, so we just got a new contact management system and all this sort of stuff that we're working on from a marketing perspective, is when somebody does express interest, we want them to listen to this episode, watch this webinar, consume this white paper before they ever set that appointment, because then I can do what you just talked about. And this is so powerful. A prospective client sits down in front of you, whether it's on Zoom or in person, and it's all about them. And Dan, that is a huge difference, because there's a whole bunch of old school people out there who still come in and say, well, I started in this business in 1983, and here's why I'm so smart, and here's all of my education, and they glaze over because they don't want it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So, and I see podcasting as the center of the ecosystem, right? So there is an ecosystem that sits around it. And this lady who I spoke to on it was on Teams this morning, she said that, and then she's printed out my white paper. I've got the skill of spending white paper, in retirement. So she's like, and she just proudly holds this thing up and gone, I've read this as well. And I'm like, well, where do we go now? Like, what do you want to, this is great. And that's the ecosystem, right? They'll listen to an episode. There's an interlude in my episode that talks about some other free giveaways, like the skill of spending white paper. They go onto the website, they download the white paper. They've touched you, metaphorically, a number of times. And we know the research out there from Google is kind of, you need to be seen 11 times to be seen the first time. You need probably 7 different touch points of someone to be able to feel like, yeah, I've listened to a podcast, I've read that, I've read a blog, I've watched a YouTube video, I've listened to another podcast. It's a whole thing that needs to be created in order for people, I think, because I think trust is harder to get people nowadays, but if you get it right, it could be actually easier and quicker to get, because it's there's a low barrier to trust, and you can really create that very, very nicely.
I think a lot of people think that, people are just going to, I will create a podcast and they will come.
Yeah, no.
That is not the case. You have to have all sorts of marketing surrounding your show. You have to be proud of your show so that you're talking about it in client meetings with your friends and family, especially with the first part of the podcast that we talked about. If grandma and grandpa are starting to start a podcast, they need to tell all of their friends in retirement and their kids and their grandkids, hey, we want you to listen to this so that you guys can really know who we are. It's the same thing in business. And you also said something, and I don't know if we were intending on doing this from a financial advising or a business perspective, but you have to get them off your rented audience, which is podcasting, into your owned audience, which would mean you get their contact information. And the white paper is the perfect way to do that. In fact, that's one of the systems that we teach, is you have to have, someone to call it a lead magnet, right? But I don't necessarily think it's as cut and dry as that. But, and now, and by the way, that number that you just talked about, it keeps going up, Dan. When we first started, it was 4, right? So 8 years ago, it was 4. You had to have 4 major pieces of initial content that they would consume before they would take the next step. Then it jumped to 7. Now it's 11, right? And so, because again, our kind of tagline here is to rise above the noise. There's so much noise that's out there. How do you, Dan, rise above it? And you do it in a couple of different ways. You're authentic. You're who you are. This is Dan. This is not a front. 2, you're dumping so much wonderful, good, meaningful, worthwhile content out there. It's not fluff, right? And then you give away something else for free. right? Here's a white paper. Here's a copy of my ebook. Here's a checklist of the 10 things that most people do wrong in retirement. Check them. If you scored more than 4, you need to call me so that you don't screw yourself in retirement. These are the little things that I know we know work because, we've done this for so long.
So, and here's my take on that. I think I agree with you. I think a lot of people are scared of giving away stuff, right? And again, that can apply to advisors, absolutely. But it can also apply to the first part of the conversation. If someone's setting up a new consultancy business, they're like, well, actually, I want people to pay for my wisdom. I mean, my view on that is that if someone consumes your free content and wants to go and then do it themselves, they were never going to be right for you anyway. Because at some point they were going to check out. At some point, and the great thing for me is that if they were always going to be that person, previously I would have probably wasted 3 meetings on them. And then they would have run away with some of the free conversations we've had. My point is that people will consume your free content, you will gather their trust and respect, and they will still want to hire you because they still don't want to do it themselves. And they're the kind of people that we want to work with. And I think if we frame it like that, we are actually, it's a wonderful filtering mechanism. It's a time-saving mechanism because we're going to get to the right people quicker. And yeah, I think that's a real key thing to say on that. And I think it is absolutely a barrier, but people need to. It lives in our head, like a lot of barriers, right? It's not built in the real world. Yeah, and it's really interesting. I had someone the other day who come across me when I'd done an interview on a podcast with someone else, and they were like, "I loved your interview. You mentioned your podcast. Can't wait to dig into episode 1." And I sent them an email back, and I was like, "Could you start at like episode 35? Because I think like 1 to 12 are just." I don't think I'm any good. Very interesting you said that. I was like, yeah, that's cool. We'll go there. It's fine. What do you think? I think you mentioned this a little bit. You mentioned kind of money and politics and sex and all these kind of taboo subjects that make it really challenging to talk about. Now, obviously, part of what we do is money, but I made an intentional decision to not actually talk about money as per se. My podcast is about retirement and retirement life. And yeah, we touch on it a fraction, but I do think, the research says that you keep going into that. It's not particularly a great thing. It makes for a compelling financial planning podcast in your experience.
Well, we have something called the perfect content formula. And in everything that you do, regardless if it's for growing a business, growing your personal brand, or just getting your thought leadership or your thoughts out into the world, it's storytelling, education, entertainment, call to action. Every piece of content should have those 4 things. You have to tell stories. People see themselves in stories. If they see themselves as joining that story with you, the probability of them doing business with you is exponentially greater. Number 2, give it away. I mean, Kirk and I were just talking yesterday to some new team members, and we're like, look, you guys need to understand, we did 500 episodes of a show. We gave everything you do away for free, right? Now you have to piece it together and it'd be a lot of work to do it, but we've totally done that. So that's the education component. Listen, this is a show, and I actually coach a lot on this now, Dan. And I think it's important for people to understand that this is a performance, right? This is Dan turned up to 11, not turned up to 50, but he's turned up to 11. And that's what we have to bring, because I have to keep your attention for this extended period of time. So I need to bring a little bit, which means you have to warm up. Dan, I have a whole pregame that I do just like an athlete before I'm on a show, whether it's my show or somebody else's show. And it's a rote system to get myself in performance mode in order to make it so that I'm going to do good for you. You've given me this gift of your time and your audience. I'm going to do whatever I possibly can to make this as good of a show as I can on my part. And then the last thing is call to action. If you give somebody 30 minutes, 40 minutes of unbelievably meaningful stuff, it's okay to ask them. So there's a professor here. His name is Dr. Robert Cialdini. He's written a book called Ethical Influence and Influence. It's an unbelievable sales book, probably one of the greatest interpersonal communications book I've ever read personally. I refer to it all the time. But if I give you, it's the principle of reciprocity. You've given people 85 episodes of great information. It's okay to ask them to do something because they're going to self-select, Dan. Some of them are going to download your white paper. Some of them are going to set a free consultation with you. Some of them are going to, they're going to go ahead and do their own stuff. Right. And so that's okay. But you have to put in the time. And those 4 components are vital for anything that you're going to do in this medium, video, blogs, social media posts, even a short social media post. If you have those 4 things, that's a social media post that sings.
What was really interesting for me there is to recognize the 2 sides of the brain, right? And when we think about it, one side of the brain is all about numbers and the other side of the brain is all about stories. And I call it kind of, stories and spreadsheets, or numbers and narrative. And we know that numbers sit in the side of our brain that is actually very skeptical, doesn't really trust it, wants to question it all the time. Yet the other side of the brain is much more open. It's storytelling, it's more trustworthy. And you can't actually get into spreadsheets on a podcast, which I love, right? I'm not going to sit here and open a spreadsheet and talk to you about cash flow modeling. This is the perfect environment to actually sit in our client's left side of the brain and talk about stories. Storytelling beats spreadsheets all of the time, as you've absolutely said. So with that, I just want to, and I don't necessarily want to have a debate on AI because it can go down a very, very different road on this. But what I do want to kind of mention, I suppose, is that I'm pretty sure we're moving into a world that becomes less human, unfortunately. But podcasting can help us as financial planners become more human, right? Which I think is going to be even more crucial in the world we're going to move into, humanizing ourselves via podcasting.
I have a whole keynote speech on this, just so you know, so we could like totally chase this rabbit as far as you want to go. And it's basically called Be Irreplaceable. How are you irreplaceable in the world of AI? And it is this. AI can do so much and it's so unbelievable. And I love playing with it and I love having deep philosophical conversations with it. But to be honest, and I'm going to use American stock market stuff, but if I want to have somebody create a 60-40 balanced portfolio, I can literally ask my AI to pick me a perfect 60-40 portfolio based off this, right? And go ahead and tell me exactly how much of each of them I should purchase. It'll do that because I've done this before. I've actually already done this. But it doesn't know my why. It doesn't know my how. It doesn't know about all of my money baggage that I've had since I was, knee high to a grasshopper and, playing with pennies the first time I dealt with money, right? All the way to it's not going to understand why that's so important. Yes, the nuts and bolts are there, but the real conversation, that's why the name of your podcast is so brilliant. It's humans versus retirement. It's humans first. And we have to keep that in mind. AI is going to allow you and all financial advisors and really all professionals to speed up and do their work so much more efficiently, which is going to give you time to sit down, lean back and say, tell me about the trip you were just on. AI doesn't care about that, man, not at all, but you do. And I think that is something that we're never really going to be able to outsource.
Yeah. Absolutely. One quick thing on that, right? And I know AI is going to do much more than this, but simple, really, really good meeting recording software means that I'm actually more present in my meetings than I've ever been, right? Because it's like just simple things like that. But it's going to get more efficient, that we can be more human, more present, have more conversations. And I think that's where, again, people want to hear you, they want to see you. And that's where this is going to be so beautifully positioned to be able to do that. Matt, I want you to give me some action steps. So for financial planners listening to this podcast, and maybe for the people that we spoke to directly at the start of this conversation, what 3 stages, and you can make this as short and punchy as you want. What should people do before launching? What are the common pitfalls to avoid? And how can people get in the long game mindset, as you rightly said? Because one of the things I think I do see is this kind of 3-year overnight success story that people kind of say, right? It's like, oh, how's that happening? By the way, I'm 82 episodes in, 2.5 years, first 12 episodes sucked, et cetera, right? It's kind of just doesn't happen overnight.
Well, the first thing, so before you ever hit record, one, you have to know why you're doing it. And so that's that cynic start with why. You have to have a strong why. Why am I doing this? And be honest with yourself. If it's, I want to tell my stories and I want 1 million people to listen to my stories because I tell great stories, there it is. That's your why. Show up with that why. The second part of that first step is plan out your first 12 episodes. So there's something called pod fade. It's been well studied in our industry that most people get about 4 to 6 podcasts, realize it's work, and they quit. There were so many podcasts started during COVID and very few of them still exist, right? Because they don't realize that it is something that you have to sustain over time in order for it to work. 3-year overnight success, right? I started contributing to the world of thought leadership and financial services in 2007. Right. I wrote my first article for a magazine called Horse's Mouth. It was actually, I have it over here. It's about Led Zeppelin and communication. And so, and it's only taken me, 20 years almost. And I was just voted the 10th most influential person in financial services. So I'm almost a 20-year overnight success. Right. So it is the long game and you have to have that mindset. So you have to know your why. You have to plan out your first episodes, right? 12 episodes. Then when you hit record, you have to realize it's a show. It's a show. Bring the entertainment value, right? We also know that the sweet spot is between 20 and 40 minutes. So that's a flow that we want you to keep in, because we know it used to be 27 minutes, by the way, but that's changed. It's actually expanded a little bit because of short form content, and longer form content has entered into the space. And then the last thing is, be proud of the show. We're called ProudMouth for a reason, because everything that you create with us, we want you to be proud of the content that you create, because you should tell everybody about it. Now, I'm not talking about, standing on a street corner, handing out flyers, even though people do this. Listen to my show, listen to my show, listen to my show. Whatever is your level of comfort, be proud of it. Stand up, beat your chest. I created this content and I created it for a good reason. Your why. I've planned it out so you know that I'm going to continue to do this. I show up, have a good show, but then I'm proud of the content. And if you really tick those boxes, this can really, really work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's, if you're proud of it and you know that it's going to add value, then you do a disservice by not sharing it with the world, right? I mean, that's kind of, Matt, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I've got a couple of very quick fiery questions to ask you as we wrap up. First one is, apart from your wonderful podcast and my wonderful, that sounds egotistical, but my podcast, what's one podcast you think people should listen to out there? Is there something that you would recommend, one or two podcasts that people should listen to, both for entertainment and, value, etc., that you said? Is there a blueprint here or something that people can learn from?
Yeah. So it might upset your audience. So I don't listen to a lot of podcasts because they drive me crazy. Because I am a podcasting expert, I'm always listening for more than just the content. And there's one podcast that doesn't make me do that. It's called Ologies by a woman named Allie Ward. It's a science podcast. So anything, biology, astronomy, any of the ologies is what she dives into. She is an unbelievably good host, like one of the best hosts I've ever. The way she asks questions is brilliant. But here's the thing. What she does in post-production makes the show. So if you're looking at a template for the best podcast out there, period, in my opinion, that's the best one. It's Ologies by Allie Ward.
I don't know that one. That's added to the list. And like you, because I've got into the content creation mode, my content listening and stuff, my absorb, it's kind of gone downhill a little bit. So I want to get back into listening and that. So that would be amazing. And I suppose just a personal question really from you, and you've mentioned the title of my podcast a few times. What does that title mean to you? How does it, I said to you, humans versus retirement. What does that mean? And what kind of emotions and feelings does that bring to the surface?
Well, we could probably do 30 minutes on that, to be brutally honest, because I've actually thought a lot about that, because we've watched your journey, my friend, right? So Kirk and I have been paying attention to everything that you've been doing since you really launched the show. I think humans versus retirement for me just shows the level of importance and stress and seriousness that you need to take if you are going work optional. I don't think people realize the severity of the decisions that they need to make in order to live in retirement, as long as some people are living in retirement. I mean, we have people who are retiring here in the States who are staying retired, which would mean not actively working, for 30 or 40 years. Every decision that you make is going to impact if you have to go back to work at 90. The other thing that I think is really, really important about it is it's human first, right? Yes, the pie charts, the bar graphs, the spreadsheets, all of the maths and things that are so much fun for you to do, which is not my bailiwick, humans first. And I think you've done a very, very good job of communicating the human element of all of this while still reminding people that this is a really big decision and it is somewhat of a competition and you need to be prepared for the game that you're about to play in retirement.
Love that. My very final question, because I've learned from the best, what should I have asked you that I haven't?
Well, this might seem like a shameless promotion, but it's really not meant to. If you're a financial advisor, if you're a person who works with financial advisors, or if you're in retirement and you really want to dip your toe into podcasting, I'd love for them to go to the Academy, right? I mean, we built this for a reason. It's very, very easy to consume. We teach you everything that you could ever possibly need to know about starting your own show. Again, whether that's for personal reasons or professional reasons. And so I'd love people to just try it and to jump in and do what you did. You take the time, do the reps, learn from the courses, do the worksheets, because if this is something that you're committed to, you better have a plan, and the Pod Rocket Academy can give you that plan.
And I second that. Links to all of the websites and sign-ups forms will be in the show notes, as you'd expect. But I absolutely second that. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. I don't know. This would be episode mid to late 80s here if I hadn't put those reps in at the start, right? I really didn't know what I was doing. I really knew I wanted to launch a podcast. Where do I start? I love the way you frame it. You've got kind of podcasting 101, 201, 301, you know, the stages that you go through, the learning, the worksheets and all of that stuff. So anyone listening to this that is seriously thinking about becoming their own loud, launching their trusted voice out into the world, there is no better place to start than Matt and Kirk's business, because it does, all of their expertise and wisdom and the wonderful team that you have, by the way, behind you that do all of this is there for it to be consumed. So thank you for that work that you've done. And I think the more people that can consume that, the better.
Thanks, brother.
Matt, thank you so much for your time. I hugely appreciate it. And I can't wait to see what you're going to do, because I know you've got some big plans coming up, right? So yeah. I can't wait to see that. And thank you for your time and your wisdom as always, and sharing everything with our audience. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And that just leaves me to thank everyone once again for tuning in to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Until next time, you take care.